Hey and welcome back to The History Freak. It's time for another review, and today I will be talking about the 1998 movie Elizabeth, directed by Shekhar Kapur. This is one of the first history films I remember watching back when I was a child. I liked history at that point for sure, but I do think this is one of those films that made me really want to know more and contributed to me becoming slowly obsessed over the years. That's the thing with history. The more you discover, the more you want to keep learning. Before we start, why not subscribe to this channel and press that notification button and you won't miss any of the fabulous videos we have planned. But for now, I'm going to talk about my big thoughts about this movie, Elizabeth. Number 1. Historical accuracy. Is this film historically accurate? Well, I would say yes and no. I have certainly seen supposedly historic films that are far less accurate than this one. But there are times when the film is pretty far off. Also, some of the timelines are frankly bizarre. I particularly feel a lot of the things suggested about Robert Dudley are just completely untrue. So I'm still not sure how I feel about that character. It feels like they have taken some of the big moments in Elizabeth's life and tried to fit them all in this film and jumbled it all up to make a story we can follow. But I'm not going to spend this video nitpicking and pointing out the many things this film gets wrong. No matter how annoying it may feel at times, there has to be some acceptance that we will never get a true account, and we just have to enjoy it for what it is. And this film is still very enjoyable, with a lot of really good things about it, including some great performances from the cast. Ultimately, I have seen this film many times, so the good must outweigh the bad, at least for me. Number 2. A brutal start. The start of the film is quite intense, to say the least. At the very beginning, we get this dramatic music and words on screen quickly catching us up with the backstory of Henry VIII, Mary I, and the religious issues England was facing. They inform us incredibly briefly of some of what we need to know. I actually really like this little intro. It certainly gets the viewer's attention. Following this, we see an unpleasant scene of 3 Protestants having their heads shaved and then being burnt alive. It's a hard scene to watch, and the distress of the 3 Protestants is difficult to see. The crowd viewing the burnings is uneasy, which is accurate of how people felt. There are more reasons as to why this was a difficult period for England than just the burnings, and more info would have been good, but I guess they had to limit content or the film would have been years long. Later we see Elizabeth enter the tower with heads on spikes. It's dark and pretty full on. I am not somebody who usually enjoys seeing a lot of violence or unpleasant scenes in films. That's why I have never watched a Saw film in my life, and I never will. I usually skip this opening, but for the sake of this review, I put on my big boy pants and sat through it all. They need to set the scene quickly and as best they could, but I was kind of glad when this was over. Number 3. Mary. One thing I actually really like in this film is the portrayal of Mary I, and I wish we had gotten more of her. Firstly, I found the casting choice to be very out of the box. The great Kathy Burke was for me someone I grew up watching on comedy shows. To have this comic actress take on Mary I is such an interesting choice, and I think she did it brilliantly. The material she was given was strong, although made her look a lot more on the edge than is probably fair. The first scene we see with Mary is really strong. We see her advisors filling her head with things about Elizabeth, causing her to lose her cool. I think we are encouraged to see Mary as a villain, but also encouraged to have some pity on her too. Like with a lot of this film, they chop up bits of information about Mary and squeeze it all into a few scenes. But I enjoyed it. Mary played such an important part in Elizabeth's life, and I always appreciate when filmmakers don't just ignore her. In Mary's scenes, something that could be easily missed on a first watch is the dwarf, who is practically glued to Mary's side and often just staring at her. This character never speaks, but has an interesting presence. I feel like the film is suggesting this woman may have a lot more influence over the Queen, which I find quite fun. Number 4. What's Elizabeth like? We first meet Elizabeth dancing with her ladies in a field away from court. But far from being a great moment to meet the star, I almost forgot to notice Elizabeth because her ladies are so irritatingly giggling constantly. In another scene later, they are almost hysterically laughing over seemingly nothing. What's so funny? Anyway, our first impression of Elizabeth is almost less about who she is and more about the fact that she and Dudley are very close. Elizabeth even tells him he is everything to her. When I review Elizabeth the Golden Age, I will probably talk more about this, but it does annoy me that films about this great queen so often focus on her emotional state and her relationships with men, and less on some of the other great things about her. Would it be portrayed the same if Elizabeth had been a man? Maybe yes, maybe no. It was important in her life, but sometimes I feel the standard with films about women is that you almost have to make it into a love story. For me, it was maybe just a little too much. Having said that, the actors had great chemistry and looked really good on screen. Once she becomes queen, we see she loves being in her position of power. She is a young woman who loves to dance, laugh and enjoy herself. Through the film we see her go on such an epic journey, making some mistakes, but also ruling as a powerful, believable queen. We often see her spoken down to by her male counsellors. Cecil is very protective of her, and kind of treats her like a child. He is determined to see her aligned with foreign powers and married, and she is just as strongly determined to pull in the other way. She shows courage and strength as well as a lot of personality. She has the perfect level of sass to make it really fun. The character has some fantastic quotes in the film. Some of my favourites were when she says to Cecil, "I may be a woman, but if I choose, I have the heart of a man. I am my father's daughter, I am not afraid of anything." Another I enjoyed, to Robert Dudley, "You may make whores of my ladies, but you will not make one of me." And probably my favourite, after she became queen, she says, "This is the Lord's doing, and it is marvellous in our eyes." The script as well as the outstanding performance from Cate Blanchett make it very powerful. Number 5. Look and music. Generally, I really like the look of the film. It's beautifully filmed with some great visuals. One of which would be the coronation scene, which was really well done. I loved seeing Elizabeth surrounded by her friends and enemies having this great moment. And I like how colours play a big part. In Mary's reign, everything is dark and colourless and depressing, but when Elizabeth turns up we get so much colour, which shows the new, younger, more vibrant queen. When Elizabeth is being interrogated in the tower in an early scene, her white dress and red hair really stand out. At the end of the film we see a very human looking Elizabeth cut her hair short so there is almost none left before she is painted white. Then, wearing a big wig and a huge gown, she emerges as the image of Elizabeth we are familiar with in some of her portraits. The courtiers stare in wonder at this amazing sight, and it even makes Walsingham cry. Dramatic music plays and she says she is married to England. It's a great screen moment. In reality, this image was about communicating power, but also about hiding truths such as scars and hair loss. But for the film, it's very fun. The music feels very authentic to me, and throughout the film, Music is usually heard in some form, sometimes subtly and sometimes loudly. There is quite a lot of dancing scenes, including one where Elizabeth dances flirtatiously with Dudley in front of a watching court. One thing I have mixed feelings about was some of the sets. They look good, don't get me wrong, but I don't always feel like Elizabeth was in a luxury Tudor palace, but stone cold rooms. Even Elizabeth's bedroom didn't feel like a room for a queen. Some sets were better than others, but maybe a bit more attention could have been paid. But overall, I think the film looks really good. Number 6. The Act of Uniformity scene. I think one of my favourite parts of the film is when Elizabeth is trying to get the Act of Uniformity passed by Parliament. Some inaccurate things going on here for sure, but as a scene in the film I really enjoyed this a lot. I love the fact that we see Elizabeth in her bedroom looking down the camera, practicing what she wants to say between yawns and making changes and getting frustrated as she does. It's very likeable and relatable. Again, full credit to the actress who delivers this scene so well. We then see her enter the room of loud, jeering men and trying to get her thoughts across to them while they shake their heads and tell her she should marry. It shows the room is highly against her, and we see the character Norfolk scowling in anger watching her speak, but she sways them using humour, personality and powerful words. You just can't help but root for Elizabeth in this moment. Number 7. Great acting. The cast in this film are so good, and it's wonderful to see so many great actors come together for this project. Heaps of people from this movie have had huge careers in TV and film. I have already said Cate Blanchett is amazing and the perfect choice. She just has this presence about her, and in other films too, like Lord of the Rings, which I'm a huge fan of, she is able to really draw the viewer in. I could list off almost every actor in this film, but some of my favourites are definitely Richard Attenborough. Even though this casting choice is a little strange, I just love him so much. Christopher Eccleston as Norfolk was also brilliant. He comes across really strong and powerful. Another I really enjoyed was Fanny Ardant as Mary of Guise. Firstly, it's good to see Mary of Guise in a film, as she doesn't always get the love and attention she should. But all her scenes were really great. Fanny delivered this tough but feminine vibe. She looked proud, beautiful and strong in her armour. She is a true ruler in the scene where she wipes English blood over the French flag, and her flirty scene with Walsingham was both ridiculous and wonderful. Really well delivered, loved it. Number 8. Favourite characters and less favourite characters. Walsingham, without doubt, was one of the best characters in this film. Of course, he was a fascinating character from the time, and I really appreciate how important he is in this movie. The performance from Geoffrey Rush is so strong. His introduction to the film is an interesting one. We see him chilling in a room before he murders a young man. I'm not sure who the heck this young man is meant to be. I think for a long time I assumed it was a son of his, until I realised he had no son. Is it another relative, or a servant, or is it suggested this could be a lover? It's not really established, so I guess it's for us to decide. Throughout the film, the character has this quiet presence, sometimes lurking in the shadows, and I really enjoyed watching his influence grow over the Queen. He at times has to tell her some hard things. It's a great relationship to watch, although actually they could have taken it even further. I would love to see a whole film about Walsingham's life, the spymaster of the Tudor age. It would be awesome. Having him lock up the bishops so as to control the vote was an interesting addition to the film, and was certainly a cool character moment. It's also cool when we get to see him again in the sequel, as I think along with Elizabeth he's the only character in both films. A fun character who we only see here and there is Lettice Howard, who seems to be a fictional character. She is a lady at Mary's court and seems to hang around once Elizabeth becomes queen. She's mistress of Norfolk and gives him information, but ultimately betrays him. I find her quite dark and almost robotic, but in a really good way. I feel she could be easily missed on the first viewing, but becomes much more fun when you do a rewatch. One character I didn't enjoy so much was the Duke of Anjou. I think this character is meant to be funny, but I'm torn about how I feel about him. It's funny-ish, but I actually find the character more annoying than amusing. Why they creatively made the decision to make the character the way he was is interesting to me. There are assumptions made here about his sexuality, and even a suggestion that he had an unhealthy, close relationship with his aunt. By making Francis the way he was, it helps the audience understand why Elizabeth didn't want to marry, although there's a lot more to it for sure. Maybe they thought it was funny, in times it sort of was, but generally I didn't love this. Okay, that's it for this review about Elizabeth. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'd love to know what your thoughts about the film were, so let me know in the comments. And join us for more history reviews in the future.